Welcome to another product walkthrough brought to you by Chartmetric. Today, we'll be covering Talent Search, an innovative tool that attempts to give nuanced, relevant metrics to a variety of artists with enough data that you can make informed decisions on their recent trajectory and upcoming trends. The best way to define the Talent Search tool is first by discussing its key differences from similar tools that exist within the Chartmetric application. The artist list certainly includes artists as well as their metrics. However, these metrics are in their more raw platform level formatting. This looks like a count of monthly listeners or changes in followers. In contrast, the Talent Search tool gives metrics on scales from 1 through 10 that seek to capture nuanced ideas of positive outcomes or preferences for artists. Additionally, the old A&R tool had lists of artists that may be interesting from the perspective of talent acquisition or otherwise. However, the artists were limited in that we had already applied filters so that the pool of artists available was specific. For the Talent Search tool, this filtering has been minimized, giving you, the user, the ability to choose exactly which artists you feel are relevant to your search and which are not. Let's move on to break down some of the metrics within the tool. Performance metrics are what we call the no-brainer metrics. In this case, you would always want to see an artist with a higher score, 10 being the high end, 1 being the low end. As an example, we have consistent growth. This is a metric that you would always want to see an artist showing a stronger metric in. Similarly, user engagement and user curation are the other two performance metrics. Let's dive into each of these one by one so that we can better understand what they are trying to capture. By clicking on any metric, the user is able to pull up a slide out that not only explains the metric as well as its component scores, but displays the underlying data that gave this artist their grade. This artist received a grade of 10, and these are the Spotify popularity, monthly listeners, and YouTube monthly views that drove that grading of 10. Here we can see that the artist went from approximately 7 million listeners on Spotify and YouTube all the way up to 27 million and 48 million respectively. Additionally, Spotify popularity shot up from being about 71 to 82. Consistent growth attempts to explain that an artist is reliably capturing a fan base and holding on to that fan base, rather than seeing a blips change. It's worth noting that this metric does not simply measure the change in the metrics for the artist, but rather the shape of the change that you see on these graphs, as well as their ability to retain that influx of fans and attention. Let's move on to user engagement. User engagement is defined by Instagram engagement, and we look at the average of likes and comments received by an artist's latest 30 Instagram posts. Our thinking here is that a more engaged audience is an audience that is more likely to engage off-platform, whether that be in purchasing of merchandise, attendance of concerts, or otherwise. Here, this artist has a grade of 6 for their engagement rate that hovers between 20.49% and 25.16%. Note that currently this is only for the Instagram platform, but in the future, we hope to expand the data that drives our user engagement metric. The final performance metric is user curation. Let's take a look at an artist with a 10 grade. User curation seeks to show the growth in playlist ads at the user level. To be clear, this does not include editorial playlists, nor does it include playlists owned by conglomerates or tastemakers. Instead, this focuses only on playlists that have the artist's tracks added, if they are owned by individual users, and this is only for the Spotify platform. Again, note that this is not simply the count of playlist ads, nor the change, but the shape and growth of that change over time. It's worth noting here that you've been looking at these metrics on specified time horizons, consistent growth sitting on 3 months, and user engagement and user curation on 1 month each. You are able to update the timeframes of each of these to alternative lengths. Consistent growth can instead change to 1 year, user engagement 1 month to 3 months to 1 year, and the same for user curation. This is also applicable to one of our contextual metrics, which we can get into now. Contextual metrics, in contrast to performance metrics, are metrics that are not necessarily what we used to call a no-brainer metric, insofar as a scale of 1 to 10 is not an opportunity for improvement versus the highest tier of an artist's grade. Instead, here, 1 and 10 are simply extremes that you can have a preference on or not. These metrics do not necessarily mean that an artist will or will not be more successful or that they are more correlated with success, but instead it is up to your preference as to the kind of artist you're interested in and how you define an artist's success. Perhaps the best way to explain this is through demonstration. Let's move into editorial curation. Here we have a grade of 10. Again, I click on the grade and I'm immediately brought to an explanation of the grade itself, as well as the underlying data for this artist. Here, this artist's average editorial reach over the past month was 94 million, as compared to the other artists who are ranked for this metric, sitting at 2.3 million. In this case, this artist is clearly seeing a larger editorial spread. However, it is up to the user as to whether or not they see value there. Some users, through interview as well as our own research, are looking for artists with a higher editorial presence and therefore a greater reach for their sounds and their releases. Other users, however, may be offering access to editorial playlists, and as a result, the artists they seek are ones that have less or no editorial presence whatsoever. Again, this is a contextual metric. It is up to you, the user, to define if you want to see either end of the extreme, something in the middle, or have no preference at all. Next, we have trigger cities. Trigger cities is a list that has been custom defined by Chartmetric. Specifically, it's a list of cities that we have identified as showing a strong correlation with future artist success should an artist have monthly listeners in those cities. Here, you can see that we've outlined an artist's top cities by monthly listeners on Spotify and monthly views on YouTube, and highlighted trigger cities in this light blue color. Again, it is up to you, the user, as to whether or not you would like to seek out artists who have a strong presence in Chartmetric's defined trigger cities. Here, a score of 10 would mean more trigger cities in an artist's top cities by monthly listeners and views, and a score of 1 would mean less. Next, we have international development. I like to call this a cousin metric of trigger cities, given that it is also based upon geographic data. Again, we're looking at Spotify monthly listeners by city and YouTube monthly viewers by city, specifically each artist's top cities. What we do is look at those cities and find how much diversity there is in countries. The more of a diverse set of countries there is, then the higher a score an artist gets. It's important to note, once again, that this is a contextual metric. We have heard a variety of use cases that could be well served by either a high diversity of countries or a low diversity of countries. Our final metric that we're going to review today is audience concentration. Audience concentration specifically looks at an artist's audience and the demographics within them. The higher the score is for this metric, then the more specific an artist's audience is. Here, this audience has a score of 9, and we can see that on Instagram, 39% of their audience are males between ages 18 and 24, and 32% are males between ages 25 and 39. This comes out to 71% of their audience existing as males between 18 and 34. Quite a specific demographic. The advantage that we suppose this metric brings is that marketing efforts can be much more concentrated. The idea being your audience is more niche and therefore easier to identify. On the other hand, a more general audience that is less niche or specific could also be beneficial. Here we have an artist with a score of 4. This is interesting as it may mean that the artist is going to be more widely accepted, an artist that you're looking to sell out to a wider variety of audiences, or be more friendly to a variety of age groups. Let's return to looking at this tool from a more holistic view. Within the talent search tool, not only do we have these 7 metrics that we can use, but we also have artist attributes that we can filter by. Here, we can click and filter the results by a specific genre, as well as other metadata elements, whether or not that has to do with the location of the artist, their own identity, Chartmetric specific measurements, their recent release data, their latest release data, and their associated labels. Another fun and also quite helpful feature within this tool is looking for artists who have high-performing collaborations. Again, this is use case dependent. Oftentimes, after collaborating with an artist who is significantly further through their career stage, a smaller, less known artist may see a significant increase in their metrics. In the event that you're looking for these new collaborators and for opportunities, instead, you would click on to only see high-performing collaborators. If instead you want to filter these artists out and only find results where the artist's metrics are reflective of mostly their own work, then you would click off. Finally, as mentioned, you are able to filter out artists that you find relevant on the basis of these metrics themselves. Say, for example, we want to find an artist who has a score of 5 or more in consistent growth, and we want to further narrow this down by only looking at the region of Canada. We have now narrowed down our search results and can quickly peruse through them with the Artist Info Quick View tooltip. At a simple click, I'm brought to see the data that pens under these artists' grades. If I'm interested, I can either click on the artist here or here, and if not, I can quickly return to my analysis. Finally, now that I have selected the criteria for an artist I find interesting, I can save these as a preset by clicking here. I name my filtering combination, and I click Save. Even more exciting, I can receive email updates when new artists fit these saved filters by clicking Yes here. These emails will be delivered directly to the email associated with my Chartmetric account. Thank you so much for tuning in to this product walkthrough, brought to you by Chartmetric.